I'm taking 70% of your millions, including your dad's estate. My name is Paul. I'm 32 years old, and I run a construction equipment rental business in Phoenix, Arizona. Victoria said those words with a smirk that could cut glass, right there in the courtroom packed with lawyers and spectators. She thought she had me cornered, thought 3 years of marriage entitled her to everything my father and I had built over decades. I sat quietly at the defendant's table while her attorney shuffled papers with the confidence of a man who believed he was about to collect the biggest payday of his career. Victoria wore that navy blue dress she saved for important occasions, the one she bought with my credit card 6 months ago. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and she kept glancing at the gallery behind us where a few of her friends had shown up to watch what she called my victory lap. The thing was, I'd been feeling something was off for months now. Victoria had started asking more questions about my finances. Not the casual, how was work kind of questions, but specific ones about property values and investment accounts. She'd wanted to know about my dad's will when he passed 2 years ago, kept pressing me about whether everything was properly documented. When I inherited his $3.8 million estate, she suddenly became very interested in our legal status as a married couple. Her behavior had shifted in other ways too. She stopped pretending to care about the business, rarely asked about my day, and spent most evenings on her phone texting people I didn't know. When I asked who she was talking to, she'd get defensive and say it was just friends. The credit card bills kept growing larger each month, filled with purchases from stores I'd never heard of and restaurants I'd never been to. But what really bothered me was how she'd started talking to other people about our marriage. Last month, I overheard her at a dinner party telling someone that she was finally going to get what she deserved. When I asked her about it later, she laughed it off and said she was talking about a promotion at work. Problem was, Victoria hadn't worked in 18 months. Judge Williams called the court to order, and Victoria's attorney began his opening statement about marital assets and fair distribution. Victoria nodded along like she was already spending the money. She kept shooting me looks that said she thought I was too soft to fight back, too naive to have protected myself. What she didn't know was that I'd learned something important from my father before he died. Trust is earned, but legal protection is built. And sometimes the people closest to you are the ones you need protection from the most. I'd met Victoria 4 years ago at a business conference in Tucson. She worked in marketing for a tech company and had this way of making you feel like the most interesting person in the room. She was smart, beautiful, and seemed genuinely impressed by what I'd built with my father in the construction equipment business. We'd started with 2 bulldozers and a dream 30 years ago, and by the time I met Victoria, we were the largest equipment rental operation in the Southwest. Victoria moved in with me after 6 months. She was attentive, supportive, and seemed to understand the long hours that came with running a family business. When my father got sick, she was there through every hospital visit and every sleepless night. She held my hand at his funeral and told me she'd help me honor his legacy. But looking back, the warning signs were there early. Victoria had expensive tastes that didn't match her marketing salary. She always wanted to eat at the nicest restaurants, buy clothes from boutiques downtown, take weekend trips to expensive resorts. When I asked about her spending habits, she'd say she worked hard and deserved nice things. I didn't mind paying. I loved her and I could afford it. The real shift happened after we got married 3 years ago. Victoria quit her job 6 months later, saying she wanted to focus on supporting my career. That support mostly involved spending my money and complaining when I worked late. She started talking about our assets and our future in ways that made me uncomfortable. When I mentioned keeping some business finances separate, she accused me of not trusting her. My father had always been protective of the family wealth. He'd made his money through careful planning and hard work, and he taught me to be smart about legal protections. When Victoria and I got engaged, he insisted we get a prenuptial agreement. "It's not about love, son," he'd said. "It's about protecting what we've built for the next generation." Victoria had resisted at first, claiming it showed I didn't trust her. But my father's attorney, William Chen, no, his name was William Garrett,
had explained that prenups were standard practice for anyone with significant assets. Victoria eventually signed it, though she complained the whole time about how unromantic it was. She said she didn't even bother reading the whole thing because she trusted me. The prenup was comprehensive. It protected all premarital assets, inheritance money, and business holdings. Victoria would be entitled to half of any assets we acquired together during the marriage, but everything I'd built before we met and everything I inherited from my father would remain mine alone. I thought the prenup was just a formality, something to make my father feel better about his son's marriage. I never imagined I'd actually need it. But as Victoria's true intentions became clear over the past year, I realized my father had been wiser than I'd given him credit for. The moment everything crystallized was 3 weeks ago. I came home early from a job site and found Victoria on the phone in my home office, going through financial documents spread across my desk. She was reading numbers from my father's estate paperwork to whoever was on the other end of the call. Yes, $3.8 million in property and investments, she was saying. Plus, the business is valued at around $6 million. I'm telling you, this is going to be huge. When she saw me standing in the doorway, her face went white. She quickly hung up and started gathering the papers. Oh, hi, honey. I was just organizing some paperwork for you. Who are you talking to? Nobody important, just my sister. But Victoria's sister lived in Seattle and never called. And I'd never given Victoria permission to go through estate documents. Those papers were locked in my office safe, which meant she'd somehow gotten the combination. I didn't say anything that day, just nodded and walked away. But something inside me went cold and clear. Victoria wasn't organizing paperwork to help me. She was calculating how much she could take.
Over the next few days, I started paying closer attention. Victoria made calls when she thought I couldn't hear. She'd started using terms like community property and marital assets in casual conversation. She'd even asked me about hiring a good divorce attorney under the guise of helping a friend. The final confirmation came when I checked our joint credit card statements. Victoria had charged several $1,000s to something called legal consultation services 2 months ago. When I called the number, it turned out to be a family law firm downtown. The receptionist confirmed that Victoria had been a client. My wife had been planning to divorce me and take half my fortune for at least 2 months. She'd been gathering financial information, consulting lawyers, and calculating her payout, all while sleeping in my bed and spending my money. I sat in my truck outside the equipment yard that night for over an hour, watching the sunset paint the mountains orange. I wasn't angry exactly. I was disappointed. Disappointed that someone I'd loved and trusted had reduced our marriage to a business transaction. Disappointed that my father's warnings about protecting family wealth had turned out to be necessary. But underneath the disappointment was something else. Relief. Relief that I'd listened to my father. Relief that I'd protected what 3 generations of my family had built. Relief that Victoria's greed would ultimately be her downfall. I pulled out my phone and called William Garrett, the attorney who drafted our prenuptial agreement. Bill, it's Paul. I need you to review that prenup you wrote for Victoria and me. I think I'm going to need it. The legal machinery was already in motion. Victoria just didn't know it yet. Soon she'd learn the difference between what she wanted and what she was legally entitled to, and the lesson would cost her everything. Victoria filed for divorce on a Tuesday morning. I was at the yard checking inventory when William Garrett called me with the news. Her attorney had submitted paperwork demanding 50% of all marital assets, including my inheritance and the family business. They were claiming that everything acquired during our marriage should be considered community property. They're asking for nearly $5 million, Bill told me over the phone, plus half the business and spousal support. I wasn't surprised, but seeing the numbers in black and white still hit different. Victoria had calculated everything down to the penny. She'd even included the value of equipment I'd purchased after we got married, claiming it was bought with marital funds and therefore subject to division. When I got home that evening, Victoria was packing her clothes into suitcases. She'd already moved out most of her jewelry and personal items. The house felt hollow, like someone had sucked all the warmth out of it. "I suppose you got the papers?" she said without looking up from folding her designer dresses. "I did." "Good. Then you know this doesn't have to be ugly, Paul."
Give me what I'm entitled to, and we can both move on with our lives." The way she said entitled made my jaw clench. Like my father's life's work was something she deserved just for sleeping in my bed for 3 years. "We'll let the lawyers figure out what you're entitled to," I said. Victoria finally looked at me then, and her expression was pure calculation. "You can fight this if you want, but my attorney says I have an excellent case. 3 years of marriage, community property state, significant assets acquired during the marriage. The math is pretty simple." She was trying to intimidate me, trying to make me think that fighting would be expensive and futile. Her lawyer had probably told her that most men in my situation would settle rather than go through a lengthy court battle. "Is that what your attorney told you when you paid him $3,000 2 months ago?" Victoria's hands stopped moving. She'd been folding a blue sweater, and now she just stood there holding it. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Legal consultation services charged to our joint account in July. Did you think I wouldn't notice?" For the first time since I'd known her, Victoria looked genuinely rattled. I was exploring my options. Any smart woman would do the same. Any smart woman would also read her prenuptial agreement before hiring a lawyer. Victoria's face went pale. "What prenuptial agreement?" I almost laughed. "Almost? The one you signed 3 years ago. The one my father's attorney drafted. The one you said you didn't bother reading because you trusted me. That thing." "Paul, you can't be serious. Nobody enforces those anymore. They're just scare tactics." But I could see the doubt creeping into her eyes. She was starting to remember sitting in William Garrett's office signing papers while complaining about how unromantic the whole process was. She was starting to wonder exactly what those papers had said. "We'll see what the judge thinks," I said. Victoria left that night, and I didn't hear from her again until the court date. But through Bill, I learned that her attorney had requested copies of all our prenuptial documents. Apparently, Victoria really hadn't kept a copy for herself. She'd signed a legally binding agreement affecting millions of dollars and then forgotten about it entirely. The funny thing was, Victoria could have avoided all this if she'd just been honest with me. If she'd come to me and said she wanted a divorce, we could have worked something out quietly. I might have even given her more than she was legally entitled to, just to avoid the drama. But Victoria had chosen to be sneaky. She'd chosen to treat our marriage like a heist. She'd calculated and schemed and planned to take everything I had without even knowing what legal protections existed. Now she was about to find out, and the education was going to cost her everything she thought she'd gained. 3 weeks before our court date, William Garrett called me with news that made the whole situation even more twisted than I'd realized. "Paul, you need to hear this. I've been doing some digging into Victoria's activities, and it's worse than we thought." I was in my office at the equipment yard watching the sunset through my window. "How much worse?" "She's been planning this for over a year. I found records showing she consulted with 3 different attorneys before filing. She even hired a private investigator to look into your business finances." That hit me like a punch to the gut. A fellow named James Murphy. He specializes in asset discovery for divorce cases. Victoria paid him $8,000 to research your holdings, your father's estate, even your business partnerships. She has detailed reports on everything you own. I sat down my coffee mug carefully, trying to process what Bill was telling me. Victoria hadn't just been casually planning a divorce, she'd been conducting military-level reconnaissance on my financial life. "There's more," Bill continued. "Murphy's report includes recommendations on how to maximize her settlement. He suggested she could claim the business appreciated significantly during your marriage due to her emotional and domestic support. She was going to argue that her being a stay-at-home wife somehow increased the company's value. The audacity of it was breathtaking. Victoria had quit her job against my advice, spent most of her time shopping and lunching with friends, and now she was going to claim that her lifestyle had somehow contributed to my business success? Did she find anything that could hurt us? I asked. That's the beautiful part, actually. Murphy's investigation actually helps our case. He documented that all your major assets were acquired before the marriage or through inheritance. His own report proves that Victoria has no legal claim to most of your wealth. I laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. So she paid $8,000 for a report that destroys her own case. Essentially, yes. But here's what really gets me, Paul. I found out who recommended Murphy to her. Who? Your neighbor, Stephen Davis. Turns out he went through a nasty divorce 3 years ago and hired Murphy for his case. Victoria had been talking to Stephen about divorce strategies for months. Stephen Davis. He lived 2 houses down from me. I'd loaned him my trailer twice when he was moving furniture. His wife had left him and taken half his construction business. I'd felt sorry for the guy. Even invited him over for dinner a few times when Victoria suggested he looked lonely.
Stephen's been coaching her, Bill continued. According to Murphy's notes, Stephen told Victoria that she needed to document everything, build a case for why she deserved more than the standard 50%. He told her that judges are sympathetic to wives who sacrifice their careers for their husbands. The betrayal cut deeper than Victoria's scheming. Stephen had sat at my dinner table, eaten my food, accepted my help, and then turned around and advised my wife on how to destroy me financially. He'd shared his divorce strategy with her, recommended his private investigator, probably even helped her find her attorney. There's one more thing, Bill said quietly. Murphy's report includes a psychological profile. Victoria told him that you were emotionally weak and would likely settle rather than fight. She said you were too nice to put up a real legal battle. I stared out at the equipment yard, watching one of my drivers secure a bulldozer onto a trailer. 3 generations of my family had built this business through hard work and careful planning. And Victoria thought I was too weak to protect it? Bill, I said, I want you to prepare the most comprehensive defense you've ever written. I want Victoria to understand exactly how wrong she was about me. With pleasure, Paul. This is going to be fun. The week before our court date, I put my plan into action. William Garrett had assembled everything we needed to destroy Victoria's case, but I wanted to make sure the lessons stuck. First, I had Murphy's investigative report officially entered as evidence. Since Victoria had hired him, anything he discovered was fair game for our defense. The irony was perfect. Her $8,000 fishing expedition had become my smoking gun. This is beautiful work, Bill said, as we reviewed the documents in his office. Murphy's report proves that Victoria was planning a premeditated financial attack. No judge likes to see that kind of calculation in a divorce case. But the Murphy report was just the beginning. I'd also had Bill subpoena Victoria's financial records for the past 2 years. What we found was a pattern of increasingly reckless spending that started right after my father died and I inherited his estate. Victoria had charged over $60,000 to our joint credit cards in the past 18 months. Designer clothes, expensive jewelry, weekend trips with friends to places like Scottsdale and San Diego. She'd even booked a 10-day vacation to Cabo that she told me was a girls' trip, but had actually charged to my business account. She was treating your inheritance like her personal shopping fund, Bill observed. And now she wants to claim half of it legally? The spending pattern told a clear story. Victoria had seen my father's death not as a tragedy, but as a financial opportunity. She'd immediately started living larger, spending more, acting like someone who'd already won the lottery. The inheritance money wasn't even fully processed before she was burning through it. Then I found the text messages. Victoria had forgotten to remove her iCloud account from our shared computer. Every text she'd sent and received for the past 6 months was automatically backing up to my system. What I discovered made my blood run cold. She'd been texting with Stephen Davis regularly, sharing details about my business and asking for advice on divorce strategy. But worse than that, she'd been texting with her attorney about how to hide her own spending from the court. Can we claim the credit card charges were for household expenses? She texted her lawyer. We'll argue that maintaining the lifestyle was expected in your social circle, he'd replied. Victoria and her attorney had been plotting to present her shopping sprees as legitimate household expenses. They were going to claim that buying designer purses and taking expensive vacations was somehow necessary for maintaining our marriage. The final piece of evidence was almost too perfect. Victoria had texted her friend Diana about the divorce case just 3 days ago. Paul has no idea what's coming. He's always been too trusting. By the time this is over, I'll never have to work again. Bill leaned back in his chair when I showed him the messages. Paul, this is prosecutorial misconduct if I've ever seen it. Victoria's attorney has been coaching her to hide assets and misrepresent expenses. The state bar is going to want to see these. But I wasn't interested in destroying Victoria's lawyer. I just wanted justice. What are the chances she'll try to settle when she sees what we have? I asked. 0, Bill said with confidence. Victoria's ego won't let her back down now. She's convinced herself that she deserves her money and she's not going to accept anything less than what she thinks she's out.
Good, I said, because I want her to hear it from the judge. I want her to understand exactly what she signed 3 years ago and exactly what it's going to cost her. The court date was set for Monday morning. Victoria had no idea what was waiting for her. The courtroom was packed when Judge Williams called our case. Victoria sat at the plaintiff's table in her navy blue dress, confidence radiating from every pore. Her attorney had a stack of papers and that hungry look lawyers get when they smell a big payday. I'm taking 70% of your millions, including your dad's estate, Victoria announced to the courtroom during her attorney's opening statement. She'd clearly decided to go bigger than her original demand, probably thinking I'd be too intimidated to fight back. The gallery behind us murmured approval. Victoria's friends had shown up to watch her big moment, and they were eating it up. Stephen Davis was there too, sitting in the back row with a smug expression that made me want to punch him. Judge Williams listened patiently while Victoria's attorney explained why she deserved the majority of my wealth. He talked about her sacrifices, her support, her contribution to my success. He painted a picture of a devoted wife who'd given up everything for love and now deserved to be compensated for her devotion. When it was my turn, I stood up slowly and walked to the judge's bench. I carried a manila folder containing 2 documents, the prenuptial agreement and a summary of Victoria's own investigative report. Your Honor, I said, I'd like to present these documents for your review. Judge Williams took the folder and opened it. His eyebrows went up as he read the first page of the prenuptial agreement. Then he started reading Murphy's report, and I watched his expression change from curiosity to disbelief to something that looked almost like amusement. Victoria was watching nervously now. She kept glancing at her attorney, who was clearly wondering what documents I just handed the judge. Judge Williams finished reading and looked up at me. Mr. Blake, is this private investigator's report accurate? Yes, Your Honor. Mrs. Blake hired Mr. Murphy to investigate my assets for the purpose of this divorce action. The judge looked at Victoria, then at her attorney, then back at the documents. And then something beautiful happened. Judge Williams started laughing. Judge Williams composed himself and addressed Victoria directly. Mrs. Blake, according to this prenuptial agreement that you signed, you waive all claims to Mr. Blake's premarital assets and inherited property. Did you read this document before signing it? Victoria's face had gone white. Your Honor, that agreement was coercive. I was pressured into signing it. By whom? By his father and his attorney. They said I had to sign it or the wedding would be called off. Judge Williams looked at the prenup again. I see here that you had independent legal counsel review this agreement. You were represented by attorney Michael Foster. Did he not explain the terms to you? I don't remember. You don't remember having your own lawyer explain a document that affected millions of dollars? Victoria's attorney stood up. Your Honor, we'd like to challenge the validity of this prenuptial agreement. On what grounds? Unconscionability. The terms are grossly unfair to my client. Judge Williams set the documents down and looked at Victoria with something approaching disgust. Mrs. Blake, you hired a private investigator to document your husband's assets so you could claim them in divorce proceedings. You spent $60,000 on personal luxuries while planning to divorce him. You consulted with multiple attorneys to maximize your settlement. And now you want this court to invalidate a legal agreement because you didn't bother to read it? The courtroom was dead silent. Victoria's friends had stopped whispering. Stephen Davis was staring at his shoes. The prenuptial agreement is valid and enforceable, Judge Williams declared. Mrs. Blake is entitled to half of any assets acquired during the marriage minus the debts she incurred. Based on the evidence presented, that amounts to approximately $15,000. Victoria made a sound as she'd been punched. Court is adjourned. Victoria faced complete financial devastation when the prenuptial agreement left her responsible for all the credit card debt she'd accumulated while receiving no share of the assets she'd counted on. She was forced to declare bankruptcy within 6 months, and her attempts to find employment failed when potential employers discovered her reputation for pursuing relationships for financial gain rather than genuine affection. Her social circle abandoned her when the court proceedings revealed the calculated nature of her marriage scheme. And Stephen Davis moved quietly after his role in coaching her became public knowledge. Her dating prospects disappeared entirely when word spread through Phoenix social circles about her failed attempt to manipulate the legal system for personal enrichment. I used a portion of my protected inheritance to help others by providing legal education about asset protection for small business owners.
finding peace in the knowledge that my father's wisdom had not only saved our family legacy, but could help others protect theirs as well. Sometimes the people who mistake your kindness for weakness teach you the most valuable lessons about the difference between love and calculation.